Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank the organizers for having invited me. It is for a very good reason that I'm wearing red color today, because I wanted just to symbolize how much my heart is with the foundation empowering children. I thank the entire team of the foundation for determined and very coherent activities to protect children against abuse and also to support mental health. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic of today is here for good reason as well. Just like in the introduction, you heard that resilience is a matter for each and every one of us. It gives us satisfying life, possibilities to cope with challenges in everyday life. Building resilience is determined by adults to a very large extent. Every one of us, mostly people who are closest to a teenager or a child, mostly the caregivers, but every adult just contributes to it. And it is for a very good reason that I'm going to tell you about the mental resilience in the context of the work of teachers. Our children spend around 1/3 of their time at school, and people who work there influence the shaping of their resilience greatly. Another important aspect of this topic for me is my own professional experience too. I've been working in this profession for 20 years, and I meet teachers very often. Your students, and here I'm referring to teachers, your students are very often our patients. So we are implementing now a new model for the youth and children mental health protection, and together with the experts from the Ministry of Health, we want to cooperate with you. Mental resilience, psychological resilience is related to being mindful. The most important, most precious gift that you may give to another human being is your presence. That's a quote from a Buddhist monk. And I have a saying that I often repeat as a doctor. I have a prescription for everybody, and wherever I can, I repeat it. Mindfulness, attentiveness is something that doesn't cost us, but this is a gift that we may give to other people and ourselves, regardless of our age, status, function that we have in the professional life and the material status. And the attentiveness matters greatly in shaping of the mental resilience in children. We all develop it from first moments that we spend in this life, and it is shaped throughout the entire lifespan. The power of relationships. That's real power. We have been talking a lot lately about the crisis of human relationships, crisis in parenting, increasing problem with parental burnout. As I have said at the beginning, parents have a crucial role in mental resilience, but not only. Well, I read a couple of years ago a very touching, moving book by a German neurobiologist, Karl Huttner, and he wrote this book with Ulla Hausner, who's a journalist. It's entitled "Every Child is Gifted, Every Child is Talented." There's a sentence that I remember from this book. How much the world would differ, and what would it look like if we adults wouldn't just come in the way of children's development. So, ladies and gentlemen, if we think about it deeply, about this one sentence, The answer is self-explanatory. I'm a pediatric psychiatrist. I often repeat, and I take full responsibility for saying it, we very often lack ability to listen to what children and adolescents say. Listen to their voice and to see what is happening with them, because very often the child will not say, but an attentive adult, by looking at the body gestures and face expressions, they notice that something is going on and we are missing this part. I can see in my professional experience in the hospital ward and in outpatient consult. And I'm not releasing any data, so it's still within the confidentiality protection. We lack attentiveness and, lack the skill of listening. In outpatient clinic, there's a teenager who's in 8th grade of elementary school. She comes with her mom. And I quite metaphorically say she comes with a symptom which is like a tip of an iceberg. And her symptom was self-mutilation, self-harming. Mom was worried because she noticed that the girl was harming herself, and she's been doing that for several months already and refuses to tell the mother why. And this isn't the tip of the iceberg. We know how important it is to build trust when we're in contact with a child, particularly teenager. It's not easy, but my professional experience taught me, and I'm convinced, I'm sure most of you will agree, a child and a teenager, with their energy and with their emotions, they can feel the truth that we have inside of us. If we have genuine care and the need to help this person, it's easier to have answers for very difficult questions. This space needs to be created adequately. We cannot live and support the culture of fast living. I have no consent to it. We need time to look at ourselves and our children. A visit at a doctor's cannot take 15 hours. Often 1 hour is not enough. So let's go back to my patient. So the girl said, yes, she started self-harming when she was at the end of the previous grade, and then during the holidays she stopped. But in the final 8th grade of the school, it intensified. And she said, Doctor, I've said many times that I didn't have any more strength in me to do the musical school in parallel to the regular school. And Mom said, you have invested in it so much, just roll with it, power through it. Another girl said, I keep hearing from Mom and Dad about this final school exam, that I have to have good results. There's score, there's ranking, and I have to be in the best high school in our city because my dad went there, my mom went there, the uncle as well. But I don't want to have this profession that my parents selected for me. And she has talent, she has passion, she is gifted, she wants to be in the arts high school. And we often fail to listen to children and adolescents' voice. Very often, ladies and gentlemen, when we make reference to our own work, our own area, we may notice that children cooperate with us just differently. For instance, there's a project or a presentation. We invite grandma, grandpa. If we have fun, if there's lightness and supporting children's skills while children are rehearsing for a show, that's one case. But if a so-called pressure for success and for perfection, if it dominates over the joy, when there's no room for, so-called failure, then we've already lost what's most important. And the problem is then not all children may be selected to a show or a performance. If we as teachers, when we undertake an activity to build relationships, which are the most important, then we obtain a value. We build a value which is more important. An example of a 6-year-old boy who is in a preschool. He comes back home sad. Mom looks at her child and asks a question. Has anything happened today? And the boy is not quite willing to say at the beginning, but then he says, Mom, I have a question. And he's a patient of mine, so I'm also really moved by this whole situation. The patient has neurodevelopmental disorders. There are some deficits. And there's a risk of developmental dyslexia. So it's really hard for him to learn a song or some poem or even days of the week. And it makes it difficult for him to be in this preschool. And he says, Mom, is my brain damaged? When I talked to mom of this boy, mother said it was very difficult for her to listen to it. And she asked, why would you say so? Mom, whenever we do something, we are preparing for a show, and Franek is selected, another boy, because he recites poems so well, and I was left out again. So this is an attentive mom in this example, and his boy got attention. And then she spoke to the teacher, and that boy was included in the script. There was a role of the wind. And a child who has ADHD and has difficulty to stand still during a performance, it is so good, to find a role which will support his potential. Believe me, one single situation like this one can empower a boy like my little patient. I think we have in mind people who played a very supportive role in our lives some time back. I remember a conversation with a teenager, my patient. He was graduating from high school, from elementary school, and I asked him, what is something or who is somebody that you're going to miss? And he said, Doctor, I'm going to miss my janitor. I smiled because I really hear these answers, We all create a puzzle, a jigsaw puzzle. It's not a hierarchy. We have different roles in the lives of adolescents. I smiled, and Franek continued, you know what? I'm thinking, thanks to this janitor lady, I was able to survive the school. She would always smile. She always had a little chit-chat with me. He would say, Franek, what's up? So it's sometimes enough to have a relationship like that. Let's move on. I'm watching time. I have 11 minutes. The topic is very broad. I'm going to try very hard to tell you what's most important. So, resilience. To some extent, you know about it. The problem has already been identified. The specialists in mental health have been bringing our attention to the worsening mental health of the youngest populations. The statistics have become more and more alarming. Increasing number of children in this country, twice as many children need specialist care in mental health protection. Very often, journalists ask me, could this crisis have been prevented? Are there tools that enable us to prevent that? We all know that the slogan of better to prevent than treat, it is also related to mental health as well. The most promoted tools are programs that affect mental health. They strengthen and shape resilience in children and teenagers, and they support parent and caregiver in this role. What can we do in the school environment? We know what important areas come up to make the resilience. Emotional resilience, flexibility, and social skills. The first one, emotional resilience. After workshops that I have with parents approach me and say, if only somebody taught me much earlier what I know now, I would make much less mistakes. But it happened. So if a parent is attentive, once they've realized something, they're able to apologize to their children. So in terms of emotions, they tell me, Doctor, I don't have any space for safe expression of emotions. People still often think that there are positive emotions and negative emotions, which would mean the ones that we can express and the ones we should not express. And that's a mistake because it's so important. We have like a map and like a measurement, a barometer that informs us of what is happening to us. And respectively with our child, what happens in this particular situation or relationship that experience anger or sadness so often. So a child who comes and is angry, the parent seeing such a child will not say, calm down, behave, would rather say, okay, I can see you're angry. What's really important, particularly with younger children, to show very clearly that emotions are welcome, that they will be well received. What's important, the so-called difficult emotions, envy, anger, sadness, to express them in a way that is not harmful either to oneself or to others. And to be able to do that, we need to set some rules and regulations that will help us children function absolutely in a stable way when they have a structure. Problems that we can see now result most of all from a lack of structure at schools and in households, at homes. Without structure and chaos where children have no boundaries, they're not going to cope. I have an example of a patient, 7-year-old patient, and had intensifying aggressive behavior. He was at school with very many problems, and he came to me again. We talked about the tip of the iceberg.
And this happens very often. This is also about lack of coherence in the parental diet, lack of cohesion when it comes to educational and upbringing methods. At school, you have different rules, and I really encourage you to set that code of conduct, those rules, to really create it together with the children. Why? Because we show the kids that they are empowered, they are really an important person, and they are not an object, they are a subject then. And study run by UNICEF in 2024, published this year, shows that 2/3 of teenagers, they feel they have no influence over what is happening at school, even if they are in the school council and they can do different things. And so the patient said, well, yes, he says, I would like to start the consultation. And the lady says, yes. And so he takes out notes and drawings. And Yash says to the parents, I would like to have it at home the way it is done here in the ward. What does it mean? I would like us to make a list of who has what duty, who is responsible for what, so that there is a certain structure. And it is very important, it was very important for Yash, but for all of our patients who are neurodivergent, that there is a structure. Another situation, if we have different events at school, for example, if we have a trip to the forest or to a farm, it is worth talking to the children and letting them know what we can do if the weather goes bad. So we may have to change our plans. So even if there is an issue or a difficulty, we can manage it somehow. It is also important that we can include children or teenagers into things that are unpredictable. So, for example, a teacher comes in, wants to show a super presentation, and then the projector, the beamer doesn't work. So, of course, the teacher will know what to do, but also to include the children to look for a solution together, to do it together, to have the empowerment and just see how many different things the students can do, and they feel empowered. I know that my time is running fast, but social skills are very important. And I have got different experience with psychologists. I have different experience, and it cannot be done, they tell me, dear doctor. And I know that it can be done. And I have experience with 20 plus classes, and I know that you can do a lot if you have the attention, if you are mindful. So also the social skills I can illustrate with an example. I have it from my city of Łódź, and that is the school that is part of a movement in Poland, Budząca się Szkoła, an awakening school. So this is trained right from day one. And so, for example, Yash sits with Franek and Asia with Basia. And then, the kids get mixed up, yes? But thanks to that, when they change their partner that they sit with, that is very influential. They can get to know each other. And I know it from my patients and from their parents. So if Carol comes in angry, sits like this. What has happened? Well, what's happened? What's the matter? Nothing has happened. But what's happened? Well, I drew a lot and I will have to sit with Janek this week. But what happens? I don't like him. Well, you have 1 week to get to know him, and 1 week is over. 1 week later, Carol comes, and it's important for the kids to remember that we remember what they talked about. And so Carol comes in and says, well, it is true, I could get to know him, but there's also the method of, 3 colors. Green, we are managing okay. Yellow, we may need some help. And red, we ask our teacher for help. That may be something small, but it's very important, but it really brings fruit, because it also brings good communication and also better connection between the children, but also with the form master, with the class teacher. And so, Carol, again. So there is a teacher who replaces another one who is sick. Looks like a simple thing, but someone needs to read something out loud. And so she asks Anthony to read something out. And the kids start whispering and something is happening. So the teacher asks what is happening. And then Kasia volunteers and says, well, Anthony doesn't read out loud yet because he's got certain issues, and so he doesn't read out loud in front of the whole class because he's still learning how to do it and practicing a lot. And that was very supportive for Anthony. So my time is up, and you might leave this lecture with the feeling that I am I'm saying such obvious things and talking about the obvious. It may be stating the obvious, and it is stating the obvious, but it lays the foundations for our existence. It is really being together and being with someone else, being with another human being, is something that we are missing. And for 20 years of my professional work on an everyday basis, I touch wounds of children and young people, and very often they have been hurt by the adults. And I can say with certainty that 80% of those teenagers wouldn't have had to be hospitalized in a psychiatric hospital if we adults were more mindful and more attentive. Thank you very much.